Hello and welcome to TyskySour. I'm Michael Walker. I'm joined by Aaron Bastani, co-host,
Co-founder.
doctor,
Compagno.
PhD.
Compañero, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. I've just lost my notes just
You've
as
lost
he
your
was
notes.
counting down, so I'm going to find
Lovely
those.
day. Spring is here. The sun was kind of staying out a little bit longer than it has been. I had a spring in my step on the way to Navarro Towers.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm only wearing one jumper now.
Oh, okay.
Amazing.
There you go.
Uh,
You can get the muscle shirts out again, Michael.
I need to get the muscles back first.
Ah.
We'll get there.
Still a couple of months before summer, Michael.
There's ages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. Get a bit more sunbed in, a bit more gym in.
Do you remember the original Jersey Shore?
I've never seen Jersey Shore.
And there was the guys did something called
Oh, Jersey Shore, the
the
American
original
one.
one, yeah. And they used to do a thing called GTL. You got GTL, and it was like gym, tan, laundry. Which, actually not enough guys follow those rules, frankly.
You know who had to do their laundry last week?
Who?
The 200 people that went to ZZ on Sunday, the 4th of March.
I mean, that's a bit of a nasty segue.
It's going to seem planned, but
But it's
Well,
also
that's-
true.
That's true. They did have to do their laundry. And
Presumably they'd probably have to burn the clothes, right? I mean,
no, they just said wash your clothes.
right, they didn't have to dispose of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Because, it was very, I think if you're impacted by Novichok, you know pretty quickly. So I think that was very much a precaution, wash your clothes, because you'd know if you'd been affected by it.
Right. And of course, we're talking about Novichok because
Because it's just been used potentially for the first or second time, we're not sure, in Britain 2 Sundays ago to attempt to kill, although they didn't quite pop him off, Sergei Skripal, who was a Russian spy who had been convicted in Russia for being a double agent. He'd been working for MI6 at the same time. He was in Britain because of a spy swap. He'd become a British citizen. That was how he got released from the Russian jail. And yeah, less than 2 weeks ago, he was, they tried to kill him with this nerve agent,
Novichok,
yeah.
which is apparently one of the most deadly nerve agents in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was reading about what it does to you. It does sound horrible. So it fucks up the way, it's a nerve agent, right? So it fucks up your nerves or makes them communicate in a... You can tell. I was reading about it all
fucks
day.
up your
And what I've
central- it
concluded
fucks up-
is it fucks up your
It
nerves.
fucks up your autonomic or your central nervous system, it's otherwise known, yes.
And it gives you a heart attack and lung collapse and all that shit because obviously your heart is a muscle and your diaphragm is a muscle and
It mucks about with acetylcholine production, I think.
you're just showing off now.
And all this stuff. No, because this stuff is really integral in moderating and kind of regulating all kinds of hormone production, response to stimuli. So, I mean, people muck about with you can do things with acetylcholine and various amino acids, and they can imitate caffeine or they can be like sedatives and so on and so forth. This is obviously another level, and it just overpowers your central nervous system to do all manner of things. And the reason why why was it used, Michael? Why was Novichok allegedly used against this gentleman in Salisbury
Well, so there are two...
and his daughter?
There are a number of theories. You were saying earlier that perhaps it's because they thought it was undetectable when this particular chemical weapon was created. It was done so to try and evade restrictions on the use and production of chemical weapons.
Chemical
But the other-
Weapons Convention, right?
Yep, the what?
It's not illegal under the Chemical Weapons
Yeah.
Convention, yeah.
No, I think it's the two parts that make it up aren't illegal under
Right.
the Chemical Weapons Convention. So it's like, like that, the reason you can't take bottles of water on planes anymore is because someone had these two bottles where if you mix them, then it makes something explosive.
Right.
It's sort of along that same logic. So you take two things that separately are harmless, you put them together, and it's the most dangerous chemical weapon on the planet. So either they used it because they thought it would be undetectable. That's potentially what happened with Litvinenko, with polonium. The other theory is that they use this particularly rare, shocking form of poison as a... Well, like when you have a thriller and you have a calling card, it says a calling card. So, this was obviously someone serious who had this guy's life in their sights. So it sends out a message.
Do you not think, to send out a message like that, it sounds like it's a bit too complex. I mean, it's far more likely, it seems to me, that they've attempted to kill him and it's potentially a fuck up. And this is probably not the first time that Novichok has been used in the UK or elsewhere, indeed, in recent years. I mean, this is something that was, I think, put forward by someone from the US State Department the last couple of days in the media. And they said, look, Novichok may have been used in other instances in the UK. Again, there wasn't, that may be by the Russian state. It might be maybe by sort of ancillary actors. We'll talk about that later on. But it's far more likely it's been used before and that this time it was ineffective rather than this being a signal, which of course fits in with the narrative, which we'll talk about that later on as well, about, of course, the Russian elections are imminent and the present regime has a kind of habit of going toe-to-toe with foreign powers, both during and immediately following a presidential elections. So second Chechen war with Putin in 1999, Medvedev in Georgia in 2008, and now allegedly the Brits and Putin this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I thought when it first happened was this looks like the Russian election is coming up. You want to use, if you want to start a fight with another country, you have to use something which points to a state actor, which points to the fact that it might have been you. So if Russia wants a fight to look, if Putin wants to look like a big shot, then to leave this calling card that makes it look like it could only have been a state, sort of ramps up that tension, doesn't it?
Yeah. Are we going live? I mean, I'm looking at our YouTube. I can't see us actually going live. It just says waiting for.
Oh, I assume we're going live. Gary?
It is live, yeah.
But I can't see us on YouTube.
You're on the wrong link.
No, I clicked the one on Twitter.
Click the new one.
But there's the one on Twitter, which I've just retweeted. It's got 26 people watching. And here we go. Is this the one? Here we go. And this has got more people watching. Good.
I feel sorry for the other
The
25.
30 people. That's terrible. Look, if you're watching this, get on Twitter. Tell those people to come over to this link. What's more, if you are watching this, you think it's fun, you like the Jordan Peterson one, you like talking about communist lobsters, you liked the previous show we were talking about the Labour General Secretary or manner of things, who should be the next boss of Labour, hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification button, the little bell thing. You can see us coming live every time we broadcast with Tysky. I mean, ideally, Michael Walker, we'd want to be doing this like every day, wouldn't we, ideally?
Ideally.
I mean, if Navarra had, let's say, 10 times the money it does.
Yeah, support.navarramedia.com.
Well, that's another thing, right? That's a big ask. Support.navarramedia.com, help us build a new media for different politics. So subscribe, notifications, and support. But anyway, back to today's show. We'll do a more measured, I think, plea for people's subscriptions and follows and retweets and shares later on. So, yeah, initially I thought that this was more about, like we were saying, a signal from the Kremlin. The Russian presidential elections on, the 18th? Great.
It's on Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, great Navarra FM last week with James Butler and two very knowledgeable scholars of Russian politics. Check that out, navarramedia.com. But the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. Chemical weapons, it's quite difficult to use them with real specificity and precision. They're not a precision weapon, right? Things, as we've just found out, 200 people had to go clean their clothes. The police officer was affected.
Well, that's what's
the
bizarre.
daughter was affected. I mean, it seems more like a screw up to me than a sign.
Oh, you think it's a screw up?
I just think the probability of it seems.
I mean, the
more,
fact
I'm
that
not a foreign affairs military studies person, but the probability of it seems more likely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take someone out in a foreign country to give a sign to, potentially other dissidents who you think might be giving away information. So to go back to the guy, so he was part of a spy swap. And one of the reasons why people said it would be surprising if it was the Russian government is because people who've been released as part of spy swaps don't normally get killed. They're normally considered to be immune. And it makes sense because if you've just done a spy swap, you've got back one of your spies and given the other side one of their spies. If your one then gets killed afterwards, you're going to be pretty averse to doing spy swaps in the future because no one wants to get their spy back for them to just then get summarily executed in the middle of their country. So that was one piece of evidence as to why it may not be the Russian state. But then any of those arguments which can be used to say it might not be the Russian state because there'd have been all these negative consequences, there's the riposte that it's actually to be bombastic, that the Russian state decided to do this particular assassination attempt in this particular way.
So what do you think? Because obviously we're going to talk about the political interpretation of all this, the follow-up with Theresa May, with Jeremy Corbyn, the media. Like you're saying, it seems to me that it's probably quite ambiguous, right? But what do you think? If we're going to,
Well, I mean,
we're going to appraise the responses to all of it.
So, I mean, I suppose one possible argument is it seems like it's probably come from someone who's very powerful in Russia. So this guy he obviously had a lot of enemies in Russia. So he had been a double agent. That obviously makes you some enemies. And due to the fact that people who've been part of spy swaps are normally considered retired, but this guy did get killed, there's been some, I was reading in the FT, idea that perhaps this guy had continued working. So perhaps he still was giving information to someone about various business interests connected to Putin or something like that. So they wanted to nip this in the bud.
I mean, what was he doing in Salisbury, right? Presumably he wasn't just going to the cathedral every day and going for long walks. I mean, he must have done something to keep himself entertained. People, like, he's probably got valuable information, valuable contacts. It's perfectly plausible, like you say, that he's been involved in something or other. Could be public, could be private.
But then it wouldn't necessarily be Putin that killed him. So one of the things about Russian government, and this was what they were writing about in The Economist, actually, they were saying it would be more scary if it hadn't been Putin, because one of the sort of dangerous, I'm going to sound like a right neoliberal, I've referenced The Economist and the FT already, that one of the elements of the Russian state is that it's more and more decentralized. So the KGB, which is the security service,
The FSB, right?
The FSB's become the FSB, is quite synonymous with the state, but there's different factions and different people with different accesses to different parts of the state. So even if Novichok could only be created in a state factory, there are lots of people who potentially could have got their hands on that. Lots of people, lots of Russian oligarchs who have an interest in their business dealings not being shared across the world or being passed on to various authorities. So this guy probably did have a lot of enemies, and a lot of enemies who were very powerful in Russia. Whether or not that went right to the top, whether that went to Putin, it seems
We don't know if it's state sanctioned, right?
we don't know. Yeah.
So let's go with what we think happened and what we agree on. Okay, so this was developed as a weapon in Russia. We think it was probably deployed by Russians or somebody on the behalf of a person involved in either the Russian regime or in private business. So then the question is, was it state sanctioned? Who is involved? And I think a good way of understanding how the way the Russian state, the regime works, is that it's people say it's an autocracy. Well, to an extent, some people could say it's a kleptocracy. There's loads of theft of public resources or common resources, mineral wealth, etc. But also, I think a good way of thinking about it is a polyarchy. And I think most states are polyarchies. Great book about this. I think Robert Dahl. And modern states with mixed market economies in particular, which Russia does have, do tend to polyarchy and oligopoly, which is to say you have different competing interests within the regime. So in Iran, for instance, you've got the Quds and you've got the Revolutionary Guard, you've got the clergy, you've got the sort of petty bourgeoisie, the bazaris, the kind of the small business owners. You've got competing interests who essentially speak on behalf of regions or ethnic minorities. You've got North Tehran liberals, intelligentsia. You've got different people who at different times will be able to leverage different amounts of influence and strength. And I think it's the same in Russia, right? So, but also I think the distinction between, say, somewhere like Russia and Iran is that, we should check this out, how many millionaires there are in Moscow. I don't think there's that many billionaires. It was mentioned on the Novara FM on Friday, but millionaires is like 100,000 or something, just insane.
Wow.
Let's verify that. But the point is, I think the polyarchical system of Russia is far more focused around the autonomy and the capacity to act of hyper wealthy individuals. Which I'm not making apologies for Putin, but if you've got $20-30 million of wealth, you can probably get your hands on this stuff. You just made a face. Maybe you found the number.
You're 100,000 millionaires in Moscow. That puts them 20th in the rank of cities with the most millionaires.
That's a lot of people who who maybe have a former contact in the KGB, now FSB, or various parts of the state bureaucracy, army, and they can get hold of this stuff. Right? And nobody talks about this. One of the miracles at the end of the 20th century was that something completely batshit didn't happen with Russia's weapons supply after 1991. They didn't just have nuclear weapons, they have biological weapons, they have chemical weapons, they have strains of smallpox that they developed during the Cold War. They have things like Novichok. I think there's something like 100 varieties of Novichok. One of the most deadly nerve agents we've ever developed. Humanity, not us, that human beings have ever created. So, in a way, it's a miracle that this stuff doesn't happen more often. Because it's not just in Russia, right? There's, I think a lot of the big weapons technology stayed in the Ukraine. The Ukraine kept an aircraft carrier, nukes. There's Kazakhstan. A lot of the former Soviet republics still have this stuff and laboratories, and nobody really knows where it is.
Well, there was an expert. What's his name? So it was reported in the Guardian today. I can't remember. It was someone who used to be in charge of the British military department for chemical weapons, etc., etc. He said the only place he believes they have Novichok is in Russia.
But he means the Federal Republic of Russia.
The Federal Republic of Russia, yeah. So a particular plant in Russia is the only place he thinks this exists. On the notes, you can find his name. But what is strange is that Theresa May has said... So Theresa May... So we'll move to domestic politics, but it also has relevance in terms of who did it, right? So Theresa May on Monday said that this was either done by the Russian state or it was done by someone who'd got it from a Russian state area or site or whatever.
Army or FSB or whatever.
Yeah. So either way, they've got some culpability and some questions to answer. Seems reasonable enough. But then on Wednesday, then she sets an artificial deadline, which is by midnight on Tuesday, they have to tell us. And Russia obviously say, well, who are you to set this deadline? Why are we going to answer this? Putin's got an election coming up on Sunday. He's reveling in the chance to play strongman. So it's not like the fact that they didn't give a quick response meant that it was definitely them, because the alternative is sort of equally problematic for them. It's probably more problematic for them to say in public.
Pusillanimous, they're like, oh, it wasn't us. We would never do that. You're our great friend and ally, which they don't want to say, right?
Well, also, what they don't want to say is that, oh, it wasn't us. It was probably incompetence. It was probably that, that there's lots of corruption going on in our country. Yeah. Maybe someone managed to buy this chemical weapon that we produced and then used it in your country.
Kind of a bit all over the place. Yeah. The mafia's got it half right.
Neither options look that good to them, especially to a domestic audience. Yeah. I think to a domestic audience, it's actually better to look like you're a strong country that did the thing than you don't have control of your own military assets.
It's in Putin's interest to basically repeat what Theresa May says, even if it's wildly inaccurate. That's a really interesting hypothesis. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, in either...
All the actors involved have a vested interest in a complete lie being reproduced.
Unless it's true.
No, but I'm just saying,
if it's a
logical thing to speculate about. Isn't
no one has an interest in saying anything other than this particular option.
Yeah.
In terms of policy responses, what's interesting is what Theresa May has gone for is sending home diplomats on the idea that this was the fault of the Russian state. So she sent 23 diplomats back to Russia, or they'll be sent back in the next week or whatever, who had been identified as spies. And Russia are expected to do the same in response. And that's a diplomatic sanction, which is specifically directed at the Russian state because they've blamed the Russian state. Something that most people say would be more effective in challenging the Russian state, but also all the oligarchs around it. So even if it was the Russian state or if it was one of the oligarchs close to Putin or distant from Putin, all of these people will be threatened if the UK makes it harder to launder their money in Britain. That won't just affect the state, it will affect all these different powerful interests in Russia and make people sort out their business dealings, because the reason you have to money launder is because you're spending it on dodgy things. If it wasn't the Russian state, whoever sold that Novichok, you can be certain would have tried to launder that money in some expensive property somewhere around the world, quite potentially in London.
There's an amazing story. I'll pass this over to Gary in a second. Was it Laiki Bank, the Cypriot bank, Bank of Cyprus? And yeah, this is an amazing story. It's in Reuters, 2013. And basically, as we know, there was a huge, there was a financial collapse of the Cypriot banking system. No one knows exactly how much money has left Cyprus's banks or where it's gone. The two banks at the centre of the crisis, Cyprus Popular Bank, also known as Laiki, and Bank of Cyprus, have units in London, which remained open throughout the week. So basically, you couldn't withdraw deposits in the same banks in Cyprus, but their London branches stayed open. Well, why is that? It's because Russian mafia have their money in Cyprus. This horrific. People think the Eurozone is this lovely, rule of law, highly functioning. Let's get real. Malta, Cyprus, some of the Baltic states. This is fucking Wild West country, right? So they remained open throughout the week and placed no limits on withdrawals. And this is when you couldn't withdraw more than like €50 in fucking Cyprus. Bank of Cyprus also owns 80% of Russia's Uniastrum Bank, which put no restrictions on withdrawals in Russia. Russians were among Cypriot Bank's large depositors. I'll pull that up so people don't think I'm just making this up. It's in the Globe and Mail. They cite Cyprus. Gary can post it. But yeah, London is the clearinghouse for Russian oligarchs. What they do is they get their money out of their country. They put it through the international finance system. They can somehow get it to London. They immediately launder it through London property. Nice and safe and clean asset. And Bob's your uncle. Right? Now, who is this serving? It's not serving Londoners who want to buy property, who are suffering from massively inflated property prices. It's not serving the Russian people. I mean, who's making the money on this? The speculators who are involved in, a price bubble around UK-based assets, people in the financial services industry, and these blood-sucking bastards. If we want to do something about it, I mean, an estates tax being, really, 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 eagle-eyed on people who are playing the game like this. I think an estates tax, right? Nobody's talking about this. The best way to hit Russian oligarchs or anybody. Most people that are buying properties in London worth more than £20 million, they're not buying it for somebody to live. A significant proportion of them are doing that because they're trying to launder money. I'm not saying most of them. Let's say it's 10%. That's 10% too many.
Well, the estates tax is a slightly different issue, isn't it? Because that's about equity. So in terms of the estate tax, we should do for everyone.
Absolutely.
But if someone's made their money by stealing basically from the Russian people, by stealing from a nationalised oil company or stealing from the government, we don't just want to tax 40% of that income. We want to stop them laundering that money.
But that would do more. Well, first of all, we do a few things, I think, with the London housing market, right? Which basically they wouldn't want to come here, right? They wouldn't, because the properties would lose like 50% of their value overnight, probably. But I mean, just that.
They can get to the bottom of the council housing queue, which will go down very quickly.
I'm not proposing that as a solution, but it would do more. My point is, it would do more than what the Tories are proposing in regards to this kind of, retaliatory response from Theresa May, which quite frankly is fuck all. They're laughing at that. It means nothing.
Back to numbers. How much money is laundered through the UK every year?
No idea.
Or laundered in the UK every year?
Go on. 100 billion.
It's £100 billion.
100 billion.
Yeah, well, that was the estimate of the Home Affairs Select Committee in 2016.
That's almost 5% of UK GDP.
Yeah.
I bet it's a lot more than that.
So you can see why there is reluctance on the part of the Tories to really clamp down on this, because obviously they see it as a subsidy for the City of London, a subsidy for posh restaurants, and it keeps the London housing market afloat.
All this, like the high, I've always thought about this, I was talking about my dad about this, 2008, we obviously have a jobs model go, an employment model go, the whole way of doing, how do you run an economy, right? Both on the supply and the demand side. And I said, if I had my time back, I would have been a personal trainer. And what you do is you go into these value-added services where you're basically offering a product to just the top 5% of the population. And these people are fucking personal trainers to the wives and husbands and children of Russian oligarchs. These people are £300 an hour, and those people are doing also, there's this kind of cottage industry of high value services, the Fortnum and Mason economy, that also do very well out of these very wealthy quasi-criminal people coming to London. And we should get the stats up on this. There are a lot of people, and we can talk about how there's a nexus here between Russia and Britain and ultra wealthy individuals basically just squatting in the city of London. There are a lot of people who the Russian state are trying to get extradited back, and we won't give them back. A couple of dozen, and there's a tension there because these people, a lot of them are criminals, and they're wanted for what they've done. Not that Putin is the kind of the big sheriff looking for justice. It's probably a personal vendetta, but this is all out in the open, right?
And many of them die suspiciously as well, right?
Quite frequently,
Yeah.
I think a couple of people a year, basically, who are on this extradition list get killed.
Or for suspicious reasons.
Right.
So it's often unconfirmed what happened. So in terms of this Novichok, I can see from the notes you have doubts. So it was this guy, Amish de Breton Gordon, former commander of the UK Chemical, Biological, Radiation and Nuclear Regiment, and its NATO equivalent, said the chemical doesn't exist outside of Russia. He's probably got some biases there if his career was invested in NATO.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, you think maybe Novichok is more accessible around the world
There's no
than...
peer-reviewed paper on Novichok.
Yeah, that is true.
Because we don't know really. I mean, it's kind of like a bit of a shibboleth. Like we don't really know what it is, how many variants there are of it, how it works. I mean, people can look at the data on it. There's only a couple of accounts of it. I mean, one guy died, was like one of the lab technicians involved in creating it.
Well, so everything we know about Novichok basically is from this guy, Vil Mirzayanov. So he was a Russian chemist who was working on this. And when the USSR sort of starts to collapse, he wants to let the world know about this information. So he goes to, I think it was someone at the Washington Post, and also a Russian newspaper, and they tell about this program. And you could say maybe this guy's just some wacko who was making it up, but I think his story made sense. Also, he went on trial in Russia, and part of the judgment sort of implicitly admitted that this substance, Novichok, existed. He then went to live in the United States and wrote a book where he laid out the particular chemical structure of Novichok, which I assume is how this British lab have established that this chemical was Novichok, even though they've never seen this chemical before.
But the thing is, it was developed in the 1970s. So the idea that, and I'm not saying it's, again, I said right at the beginning of this, right? I said, we probably agree it was created in the Federal Republic of Russia, okay? But the idea that you couldn't synthesize this, a chemical weapon created 40 years ago, a very clever lab technician with the right amount of money and means at their disposal couldn't create that, really? People can genetically edit dogs, and you get molecular assembly now of wines, not particularly good ones, but you can do it. What? And people can't synthesize, reproduce a chemical weapon from 40 years ago. I find that hard to believe. They'd have to get the information. I mean, the worry is the information's out there, right? But I've always thought this about the terrorist threats. People have fucking lorries and cars driving into people on bridges. Terrible. But what if one of them has a fucking brain and gets a PhD in molecular chemistry? That's when things are going to get fucking serious. And like we were saying, Russia has strains of smallpox which could kill tens, hundreds of thousands of people. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, low cost of entry, incredibly effective, kill many, many, many people. And I still think it's a minor miracle they've not been used by non-state actors. So I'm not saying Novichok hasn't been deployed here by the Russian state, but I think we need to have a much broader understanding now of actually, like I said, the low cost of entry into using what is a very, very, very effective weapons technology. In a way, just as effective potentially as a dirty bomb, a nuclear weapon. And people Iran's not got a record of using it. Iran could use it. Proxy states could use it. Hezbollah could use it. Mossad could use it. MI6 could use it. Various regional or nationalist organizations could use it anywhere in the world. So I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded about the use of biological and chemical weapons by these kinds of people in the future.
The burden of proof in these situations is a difficult question, isn't it? Because obviously Corbyn got a lot of flack yesterday by saying, when Theresa May was announcing that the government had decided it was the Russian state and they were going to correspondingly apply sanctions, well, not economic sanctions in this particular case, they were going to send back 23 diplomats and then consider their next move, basically. So it's a fairly weak response anyway. They didn't talk about any of the leverage they actually had, which is over that money that's flowing around the City of London. But Corbyn's response, which met with outrage from many people on the Labour backbenches, from the Tories and many people in the media, was to say, or to emphasise the fact that Russian culpability was not yet proved and that we'd need to see more proof,
Evidence.
more evidence before the corresponding and appropriate action was taken.
But as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council, the claim is that Jeremy Corbyn, already at that point, already having made that judgment, would have been privy to the same evidence that the government would have seen. So why is the government so eager to insist that this is Novichok? It's almost certainly been used by the Russian government or a proxy on their behalf, and Corbyn isn't. That's their point, right?
Oh, that's the government's point?
Yeah, that he's a member of the Privy Council. He's seen all of it. It's not like he's not seen, it's not like he's not seen the evidence and they have, and he's just got to believe them at their word.
But they might accept a different burden of proof, right?
Yeah.
And they're both in a way legitimate arguments.
Yeah.
So Corbyn would say, we can't take decisive action until we can sort of judge that beyond reasonable doubt this was done by the Russian state, etc., etc. Whereas the government in this case might have said there's no reason to believe it wasn't Russia. Russia haven't given us, we've asked Russia for a response, they haven't given us any reason to believe it wasn't them, so let's act as if it was. And so they're two different standards of proof, aren't they?
Yeah, and we've talked about this, that the government have a vested interest in this story. I mean, it sounds macabre and terrible because two people, from reading about Novichok, I mean, they're probably going to die, right? The guy that previously died, he was given injuries that were life-changing and he passed away 5 years later. I mean, it sounds like it's a horrible, gruesome thing to be subject to. And I think it probably does border on a chemical weapons attack, right? But that's why I think it's probably a fuck-up, because it shouldn't be a chemical weapons attack. It should be, an assassination, effectively. But what was I going to say? I was saying about...
We're talking about different burdens of proof.
Or
different standards of proof, actually, not burdens of proof. So do we need to know beyond reasonable doubt that it was the Russian state before taking decisive action, or can we just say there's no reason to believe it wasn't?
I don't know. I mean, I should have had another cup of coffee today. I should have had some black tea.
I offered you one before we went.
I should have gone to the samovar and got some black tea. No, I just think that it's all very quick, isn't it? Isn't it?
Well, so
I mean, how do you get a government? This is a chemical agent that nobody's ever heard of until yesterday, and now everybody on Twitter, all the fucking conservative commentariat, they've all got a PhD in Novichok.
Yeah.
Well, it must be Novichok. We have to act decisively. Nobody else could use it. Only Putin could use it. Only the Russian state could use it. And open and shut case. You idiots. I was like, well, fucking, I've never heard of Novichok. Calm down.
No one had ever heard of Novichok until a week ago.
No.
In fact, no one had ever known of it being used, apart from this guy who was working in the factory.
Right. It's never been deployed, right?
Yeah, it's never been deployed. Well, never knowingly.
Yeah.
Never knowingly been deployed. Well, I suppose then the debate becomes about that there is this official British establishment, which is this laboratory, which has said that they have every reason, well, they're comfortable saying that we can confirm this was Novichok. So then that's why it ends up about patriotism, right? Because it's, do you trust the institutions of the British
brave
state or not?
scientists. I mean, they're scientists, right?
Well, also...
But they're not political scientists, they're scientists. They're chemistry people. I mean, what the fuck? How they're not going to be like, well, actually, let's appraise the polyarchical nature of the Russian state system. And yes, there are outrider institutions and there are bones of contention between the financial class and the FSB and the foreign ministry at the moment. And no, they don't think like that. They go like, this atom and this molecule have done this and this, and acetylcholine fucks up your fucking, central nervous system, yada, yada, yada. That's what they know. That's all we know.
So that's why everyone's saying, that if the biologists say it and you don't know any better, why not just accept what they said?
Oh, okay, great. The biologist said it.
Or chemists, aren't they? They're chemists. you don't grow Novichok. It's not like a mold.
No, but biologists would have to. I think they'd have to be able to. If it's a nerve agent, right? If it's going to override your central nervous system, I guess a biologist would be involved, right? A biochemist.
Oh,
always.
There's a whole subject here.
No, but I mean, yeah. I do. I find. There's the political context within which political assassination happens, and then there's like the chemical nature of the nerve agent, and in like these melts minds, these two things just overlap, and they're one of the same thing. And if like we're contesting the political, Jeremy Corbyn is contesting the political context. He's not contesting like the fact that Novichok's been used. Nobody fucking knows what it is. Fine, I believe you.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying we can trust the chemists.
Yeah,
that
there's an
Novichok
elision.
was used.
There's an elision here between political context and intention and motivation.
But then all these military guys who tell us that Novichok could never have existed anywhere other than in Russia. That's where you think the more doubt should be placed.
Well, they say on the one hand, they say, well, North Korean, ICBM technology helped the Iranians create their intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
And then you've got, Iranian drones.
There's a bunch of Russians that went to North Korea that helped create their nuclear program.
Yeah, Iranian drones are helping the Houthis in Yemen, yada, yada, yada. They're all helping each other. It's a network of terror. But this one chemical weapon, it could never leave Russia. Only the Russians could use it, even though you hadn't heard of it until last week. Nobody else could use it. I mean, give me a fucking break. You can't have it all. You can't say this axis of evil, Syria, Yemen, North Korea, Russia, Iran, Al-Shabaab, they all help each other. They all talk to each other. They all share information. It's a global web of terror. Non-state actor, state actor. And then they're like, no, there's one chemical weapon. It never left this one laboratory in Moscow, ever. And we know that for the last 50 years. Give me a fucking break. How can you have that level of certainty? Really?
Yeah, no, that's convincing. Fuck it could have been anyone. It could have been anyone.
Get that on Twitter. But it's true.
Was it you?
But it's true. Really?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah.
The certainty,
what
certainty thing I don't get. I tweeted this earlier on, right, with skepticism. I go, I'm a conservative. Conservatives believe in skepticism, and we don't think in big ideas, and we think you proceed with change, and it's glacial, and you do, don't change something if it works. And then it's like foreign policy. Theresa May, yes, Beaver Arse 39, created by the North Koreans and the Iranians 6 months ago as a chemical weapon which kills children under 5 who are very cute looking. Oh, Beaver Arse 39! That kills everybody who's really cute under the age of 5. We need to fucking get rid of Kim Jong-un. And it's like, how could you be so credulous and stupid on the one hand, on the other hand go, I'm very sceptical about big ideals and the ideas of revolutionary change. And that's when they're describing like corporation tax being 26%. Doesn't make any sense. You're a fucking idiot. Yeah. Sorry. I know we've already the show's only been going for 25 minutes and I've already broken down into like slacking off the media, which is what we wanted this to be effectively.
Yeah. No, it's difficult in this situation because you never know who to... Well, because all the newspapers say the same thing, right? And then anyone else on the internet, you can never work out if they're a crank or not.
Right.
So it is very difficult to work out what the fuck is going on. And I mean, at least in terms of looking at politics over the last 24 hours, I was quite impressed the way that Corbyn sort of like stuck to his guns and was like, yeah, we can't necessarily trust the British intelligence security establishment. Well, that was Milne that said that.
Is that, do you agree with that? I mean, that's a big call politically, isn't it?
It's a big call politically. And I mean, obviously it's true that we can't just take as a given whatever the British security establishment say. I think in this case, it's unclear what the British foreign policy establishment's motive would be to twist
but when they do this,
the truth.
They don't want a Labour government, right? Let's work on the kind of a very British coup kind of hypothesis, right? There are very senior elements within the civil service, the security establishment, financial interests, the people that run this country, right? That don't want a Labour government. Now, I'm not saying this has got anything to do with that, but I think just
so you're saying there is a motive?
But that proposition, we don't necessarily take them particularly seriously, or we don't believe every word they say, I think it's a very healthy attitude for a Labour Party in opposition to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not irrational for Seamus Milne to say that.
No, absolutely. I mean, the problem though is, well, not the issue is, even though you have suspicion of the security establishment, which you absolutely should do, to what extent does that paralyse you from taking any action? And to what extent do you say, well, in this particular case, it doesn't seem like they'd have that much reason to make it up. These chemists, we kind of trust them. And we don't really have any reason to believe it wasn't Russia. So let's just hammer them on the fact that they're averse to going after the money angle, because that's what Tories don't like to go after their rich friends.
Look. Salman Abedi, this kid that killed all these young people in Manchester, the Manchester Arena, when they were watching, what's her name? This young...
Ariana Grande.
This guy went to fight in Libya and potentially Syria after 2011, right? His dad was an MI6 asset. This is all a matter of record. Peter Oborne has written about this. Peter Oborne, okay? Not me. Peter Oborne has written about this in the Mail on Sunday. And this guy was going to and from Libya and Syria And he's then gone to an Ariana Grande concert with a backpack the size of a fucking American fridge, and he's killed dozens of people. And all of us, and like, look, I'm so, and the same people didn't maybe think the guy could be a risk, and then they're saying, well, actually, this thing that was developed in Russia, the Soviet Union 40 years ago, no, it couldn't be the Kazakhs, it couldn't be the Estonians, it couldn't be the Azeris, it couldn't be the Iranians, it couldn't be a non-state actor. It has, please. Salman Abedi got fucking past you. Salman Abedi was walking around in a fucking 100-kilo backpack. An Ariana Grande concert was filmed with fucking God knows what, Semtex. Give me a break. Of course people don't trust you. Of course they don't trust you. I'm not... I mean, does that sound bad? But like, look what's happening. Look what's happening. How could I take you seriously? You were actively enabling hundreds of jihadis to go to Syria, to go to Libya, enabling, and Libya in particular. Theresa May voted for fucking us bombing the shit out of Libya. Look what happened. And it's the same foreign policy military establishment who fucked up Libya, who fucked up Iraq, who fucked up Afghanistan, and now saying, yep, Russia did it. We need to do this to Putin. And Corbyn and Milner go, well, let's get some evidence. And then they're demonized instantly. And the same fucking idiots think that they're right. And they think that anybody who agrees with Milner and Corbyn's like a wacko, a crank. And you go, fuck me. And then the Sky did a poll today, right? Most people back Theresa May over Corbyn. Well, of course, most people back the Tories over Labour on foreign policy. I know that. I mean, that's why I want to talk about the economy as much as possible, and that's why they don't.
Do we know that about every issue?
No, but the point is this. We saw it in a general election context, right? When it's not, like, reactive, and we actually have a proper conversation about Britain's foreign and military policy, defence policy, I actually don't think they win the argument. I think it's probably about 50-50, which isn't good enough for them, right? Because they fail abysmally on the economy and public services.
I mean, I think the danger in this... Okay, well, I suppose you can make it seem obviously true. So after the Manchester attack, obviously Corbyn came out with a statement which many people in the media and the establishment thought would be very controversial and mistaken in the middle of an election campaign, which was to say that we can't really talk about tackling terrorism in this country without looking at the foreign policy we've been adopting for the last 20 years. And everyone was like, oh, this must be the end of the campaign. You can't say anything after a terrorist attack other than what they did was evil and inexplicable, and we can't make any excuses, and we can't even dare to explain this.
Deranged.
If we were to dare to explain the fact that someone has committed a terrorist attack, we'd basically be justifying it. We'd basically be on their side.
This is the most mad, batshit stuff imaginable, right?
It is really weird, but it's absolutely pervasive. And it had been a sort of unbroken spell in Britain until Corbyn said it in that general election campaign, which was why it was so, revelatory. And the establishment got a big shock when it turned out that actually people agreed with Corbyn. People didn't think, what? He's trying to explain this action?
So
He's
weird.
trying to relate the fact that there's more terrorism in this country to the fact that our foreign policy disrupted a whole region of the world and created an environment by which this kind of activity, these kind of ideologies, these networks could form and give a lot of people a lot of reason to be very pissed off with Britain. And people thought, obviously that's true. We all knew that.
Well,
but it had been forbidden to be said.
I did a piece on, it's the 70... Oh, God, I think I've been saying it's 76th. I think it's the 77th anniversary. Oh, God, anyway. It's the 77th anniversary of Mohammad Mosaddegh beginning the nationalisation process of Iranian oil on March 15th, 1951. So, what are we talking about? 67. I've been saying it right. Thank God for that. 67. I thought I'd gone wrong all day. 67th anniversary. Long story short, Britain basically had they had control of Iranian oil. At that time, it was producing around 8% of the world's oil in 1950. The money, the taxes that the exchequer were taking from Persian oil was more than the royalties going to Iran. And in 1950, the Americans did a deal with the Saudis, Aramco, 50-50 split. So the Iranians get wind of that and they say, well, we want something similar. They're not saying we want it all back. They just go, look, America's not like this lovely nation. Like they're a hyperpower now, okay? They're far stronger than you, and they've just done a deal with the Saudis, and we're far stronger than the Saudis, and it's 50-50. So, like, maybe that's fair. And the Brits go, no way. We're not. And by the way, this is a Labour government. And the Brits go, no way. And they do it. They say no way because the economy is screwed. You've got a huge national debt, like 250% GDP. You've obviously had the end of empire. You've got loads of war debts, like Lend-Lease stuff with the US. You're still spending like 10% of GDP on defense because you're still pretending you're a national, world player. So they couldn't really afford to do what the Yanks had done with Aramco. So they said no. And Dean Acheson said this, who at the time was the US Secretary of State. He said, the British had a, quote, rule or ruin policy in Iran. Rule or ruin. And so you look at people in the Middle East, like my father, that's how they've come to understand British foreign policy. And when you talk about that, there's justified grievance in Iran about British foreign policy. Yes, it was 60 years ago, but it meant that the Iranian Revolution happened, which a lot of people don't like, or it meant the Iranian Revolution happened, which had features they don't like, or that they like it, but they don't like the sanctions which come after, etc. It's all because of the removal of of a democratic leader, Mohammad Mosaddegh, and empowering an autocrat, the unelected Shah Reza Pahlavi. So, and that's just one instance. We can talk about Suez in Egypt. We can talk about, government removal in places like Panama, Haiti, Nicaragua by the US. I mean, dozens of countries have justifiable cause. And I'm talking about nation states here, right? I'm not even talking about ethnic groups or organizations, non-state actors. And like you say, it was verboten to say this. You couldn't say it.
Well, one reason you couldn't say it is because it's quite difficult to argue that some of these foreign policy decisions were in the greater good. So the only way that you can keep that illusion alive is to say that any questioning of British foreign policy is itself unpatriotic and Laura Koinsberg said yesterday on the BBC News, it's really telling. She said, it's traditional for the two main parties to unite when it comes to foreign policy, to put aside their differences. It's like, what? That's a terrible convention.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, that's...
Do we do it on the health service?
That's really when you need the most scrutiny. I suppose it's because that's when you're acting as a country versus another country.
Well, historically it's been the power of royal prerogative, right? So, historically it was like Her Majesty's prerogative and then the government went through with it. And then I think maybe you can argue that's an outgrowth of our constitutional system.
Well, it's also the idea that
which we need to change.
It's also the idea that within the country, us two teams, the left, the right, Labour and Tories, we're having a competition and that's a healthy competition. But when it comes to outsiders, that's when we put aside our differences and we rise above our different political tribes and become just British.
But the Democratic Party system's only really existed, let's say, since the 1860s, 70s, truly democratic. And then, of course, the full expansion of the franchise over the course of the 20th century. And I think that, like I say, the British Empire and so on was overseen. Executive powers were effectively invested. The party system wasn't as dynamic as contentious. It wasn't as subject to democratic forces. And that goes all the way through to Suez, right? The Tory party, the Conservatives didn't know about what Anthony Eden was doing with Suez, let alone the opposition, right? Eden said, we're going to do Suez because it's Nasser's doing this, and it was a huge fuck up. And that's why he's been remembered as the worst prime minister until David Cameron, because he didn't actually command it wasn't a legitimate position within his own party. It wasn't fully communicated. There wasn't any accountability. He wasn't, they weren't all in receipt of the facts. So it doesn't start with Iraq. This tendency, it doesn't start with Iraq. It doesn't start with Afghanistan. It doesn't start with the Falklands. I think fundamentally it's an outgrowth of our, like I say, a parliamentary system where we don't really have sufficient checks and balances on things that historically have been the prerogatives of the monarch. And this is one of them. It's like the appointment of doesn't the Prime Minister appoint bishops and shit like this? I mean, who knows? We don't have a... No, I think they do, right? Or the Lords. Another great example. Who sits in the House of Lords. It's just this weird system from 150 years ago, which we've not really properly changed. And it just leads to constantly bad decision making.
I think it's the same in many... it's not just constitutional, right? It's the same in many countries that when it comes to foreign policy, you're supposed to unite and sort of nationality is supposed to trump everything else, which does lead to terrible decision making because it ends all scrutiny.
But you not think in the UK in particular, the way that the system... I mean, you can see it, like I say, with Eden, with Suez... You could see it with the Falklands. You can see it with Iraq. There seems to be the way the system... We don't have a president, right? We've got a prime minister who answers to the cabinet and a cabinet that answers to the party. Then we have this two-party system, which sometimes isn't a two-party system. So the Iraq War, classic example. If we had a two-party system like America, there would have been zero dissent, or it would have been the Labour rebels. But because you had the Liberal Democrats, I think that was a big thing, right? There was a major political party which was in the public conversation saying this is not right. And I think we have this bizarre hybrid of a 20th century system and a 19th century system, and we believe that we're in a 21st century democracy. And I just think, I mean, with Libya it was the same. It's just a mess. So I think it's partly psychological. I think it's partly constitutional.
But in what constitution would make that less likely? Under what sort of constitutional scenario do you see that you'd have a healthier debate when it comes to foreign policy? So I mean, in the United States, they have exactly the same thing, right? Whereas if a president wants to go to war, then all Congress people have to sort of like fall behind whatever action they've taken.
I think the US is different because like they do random stuff which only the president fucking knows about, right?
Yeah, but they have the same thing where any politician has to fall into line. So the Democrats, they always have to go on about how much they hate Trump. Then he bombs Afghanistan. They're like, whoa, so presidential. We love it.
It's also, it's an imperial. Okay, so it's like the primary imperialist superpower, right? But let's look at other countries. I mean, France, for instance. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when it comes to foreign policy and defence, the president really is agenda setting, right? But they still do have to kind of make the argument for this stuff to the legislature. So in the case of Iraq, Jacques Chirac was like, we're not fucking going to Iraq. I don't like Jacques Chirac. He was corrupt as fuck. But he set the agenda on it. President, those are the powers of the president. I think it would be a little bit clearer. And whereas with Tony Blair it was like lying to Parliament, deception, yada yada yada. I would prefer an elected head of state, and maybe that's one of the powers you would invest in them. And I think I agree with you emotionally. Foreign policy, defense of the realm. I mean, this goes back all the way to when Machiavelli talks about Rome, right? It brings people together. But I still don't think we have a system set up for it at all.
Interesting.
What do you think?
I've never really connected our foreign policy to our particular constitutional makeup. I'd have thought it was more about
But it's the powers of raw prerogative, right? The power, I think, historically, didn't even need a vote through. You didn't need a vote through Parliament to declare war.
Yeah, but I mean,
it was purely performative.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't see how that differs. I don't see why that is the reason that it's very difficult to talk about opposition to foreign policy when you're in Britain. I just think that's the case in every.
So you don't think there are any constitutional changes or changes to the parliamentary system or investing certain powers with certain people that could be made that would mitigate this at all?
Well, what we're talking about specifically here is mitigate the tendency that when someone speaks out against the British foreign policy establishment or whatever foreign policy project the government is currently going with. So in the case of Iraq, the Tories obviously came behind it, and anyone who critiqued it was seen as unpatriotic. The BBC got behind it very strongly. There's that amazing footage of Andrew Marr talking about how when Iraq surrendered, when the statue got pulled down, he was saying the Downing Street was full of watermelon smiles, and Tony Blair has now become a leader. Like all his doubters have been proved wrong. So there is an idea or a tendency for the establishment to line up behind a particular foreign policy for the good of the nation.
You think it's purely cultural? Or overwhelmingly cultural?
I think it's overwhelmingly cultural, yeah. Yeah, basically. I can't see how sort of like a technical constitutional fix would change
I know there are some countries that go to war more. I mean, look at it like a comparative politics person, right? There are some countries that go to war more than others. Is there a correlation between that and their political system? Well, Britain and America, yes, they're both formerly imperial powers. They both also have effectively a two-party system. Italy doesn't go to war as much since 1940. Clearly that's cultural. Clearly it's a legacy of fascism, etc., etc. But does their parliamentary system mean that they will always be far less likely to intervene in a foreign country, although they did with Silvio Berlusconi? They were involved in Afghanistan, they were involved, I think, briefly in Iraq. Are there certain parliamentary electoral systems? I don't know. This is an open question. I'm interested as a political scientist, which can mitigate that tendency a bit. But maybe
we'll do the research.
It's a boring, wonky thing for our audience. But I think it's something to think about.
I mean, the big reason that the USA and Britain go to war quite a lot is because they didn't lose the Second World War, right?
Right.
I mean, that demilitarized Germany and Japan
war
for
is the
ages.
continuation of politics by other means, as von Clausewitz said.
Good quote.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you can invert it and say politics is the continuation of war by other means. I think you can use it both ways. It's been done both ways, right?
Yeah, I like the second one's kind of sinister. I like it.
Well, it's more Machiavelli,
yeah.
isn't it?
What do you think's next, Aaron? How do you think this story is going to develop?
We had this amazing column by JC. I mean, maybe Gary can pull this up. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is that copyright? Is that going to get us in trouble?
The Guardian, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
You can definitely show an article. That's not copyright.
Is that fair use? Michael?
That's fair use. Yeah,
Our media lawyer.
I really don't think anyone minds if
What's JC's
you
response?
show their article.
I even tweeted. I just tweeted this and I just said, leadership.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's very good. He's sort of shifted to saying. I mean, I'm not going to read the whole bloody article, am I?
Well, give us a précis, Michael.
So what
Elevator picture of Jeremy Corbyn's article in today's Guardian.
So he's saying we should be outraged by the attack. It's probably Russia, but we shouldn't jump to conclusions. We need to weigh up the evidence. He's saying that he's going back to Theresa May's statement on Monday, where she said it was either the Russian state or negligence by the Russian state, and he's saying that still holds. I think he thinks that she's rushed to the judgment just because Russia didn't reply to say that, it must have been the Russian state then. We discussed that earlier. I think that is a very weak argument on that part. He talks about his consistent opposition to human rights abuses in Russia. Warns against McCarthyite intolerance of dissent. It's quite a strong line.
But it's true, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, yeah. Talks about rolling out the red carpet for Saudi Arabia.
We should talk about that later a bit, I think.
And then he talks about regulating or sort of like trying to block money laundering by Russians in Britain.
Because you've got this huge arms deal now going on between the UK and the Saudis, these Typhoon Eurofighters. It's going to be worth tens of billions of pounds. Tens. I mean, Britain doesn't export many manufactured goods, right? And I mean, the ones they do, they tend to be weapons. Tens of billions. This is a single deal. Then you have Liam Fox going to see Erdogan in Turkey, in Ankara, not that long ago. It's a different kind of deal. I think they're selling information and know-how to help the Turks build domestic jet fighters using BAE patented technology. Regardless, we're helping two of the worst regimes in the region. Saudi, I mean, at least Turkey's a democracy, okay? I know Erdogan doesn't want to take it in that direction. I know the AKP are trying to really screw it up. But it has a rule, it has something resembling a rule of law. It has something resembling a separation of powers. Again, it's all backsliding, but it's there. Saudi Arabia is like a despotism. It's a tyranny.
It's weird, isn't it? You can't go. It's morally unacceptable to go on RT as a guest, but it's morally perfectly fine to sell fighter jets to Saudi Arabia.
Hey, what's your position on RT?
On RT, I think it's not that relevant.
I mean,
I think it'd be a stupid on whoever you are. I think it'd be a stupid policy to shut down RT because I don't think it is that influential. And not many people watch it, and there'll be reprisals on the Russian side where they kick out a load of BBC journalists who probably have a bit more impact anyway.
Right, exactly. In the whole soft power game, the Brits are winning, right?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to play that. You want to play that.
Yeah, no, I think that would be. And to be fair, I think that's probably one reason why Theresa May hasn't shut down RT. Because she doesn't want to be responsible for.
But also, it's for Ofcom, right? So you've got when it comes to the City of London, and you say, hey, we need to do this to the banks, and the Tories go, look, this is regulated, and it has a regulator, and it's laissez-faire, no political interference. When it comes to media, hey, Ofcom, I have actually a bit of trust in Ofcom as a regulator. Ofcom shouldn't do this. Ofcom got rid of Press TV's license, right?
I think Ofcom have said that this might affect.
Press TV did interview a tortured journalist in 2000. I mean, it's pretty bad shit. RT haven't done that, right? It's like.
What do you mean they interviewed a tortured journalist?
Oh, there was the confession of a tortured journalist was broadcast on Press TV.
Wow.
It wasn't as bad as it sounds, but it was pretty bad. I mean, it's sufficiently bad that the license needs to be withdrawn. I think the right thing was done. He wasn't fucked up. He'd been waterboarded and stuff.
Yeah, fucking hell.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucked up. Obviously, it's fucked up. So the Ofcom made the right decision there.
I think they've said they could take away RT's license because owners need to be fit and proper.
Yeah, leaving it to the regulator, I think, is a reasonable position. But then I thought McDonald.
But so long as the rules are correct, right? Because you don't want to leave it to the financial regulator because the laws aren't correct.
No. But nobody's.
But I agree. I don't think we need tougher laws when it comes to who can open a TV channel.
Nobody's saying Ofcom's not doing the job right. Yeah. I mean, maybe in 10 years, yeah, sure. But in terms of who can and can't broadcast in the UK. But then John McDonnell was saying that he thought RT should be boycotted. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
that would be popular, right? With the Tories. That would catch on. More of them go on RT than Labour do.
I think Labour. Is it only John McDonnell that said boycotting RT is the right
think
thing
so.
to do? Has Corbyn not said it?
No, he does. Corbyn's team explicitly came out and said we don't agree with that.
Oh, interesting.
We're leaving this to Ofcom. We believe in independent, impartial regulator.
But I mean, why would that that's not up to Ofcom anyway, right? So
No, but McDonnell suggested the boycott, right?
yeah.
He said Labour should. I think he said it off the cuff in the Sky or a BBC
Oh,
interview.
but Corbyn's office is saying as
This
long as
hadn't
Ofcom think they're fit and proper,
Yeah.
we're not going to do a
Hadn't been
boycott
called-
because we don't do boycotts of legitimate.
I mean, a good
channels.
leftist position would be, well, the NUJ haven't called for a boycott and the regulator haven't said anything, so...
But the NUJ haven't called for a boycott of the Sun. Leftists don't do the Sun. I think it's up to you. I mean, I really don't think it's that big an issue. Like, if you want to go on RT, go on RT. If you don't. You know what I mean? Like, the Russian state does a load of fucked up shit.
I mean,
And
RT
that
is...
channel's not very good.
All RT is a broadcaster for, like, it's primarily, it's about projecting soft Russian power, right?
Yeah.
What do you think Al Jazeera is? What do you think the Qataris are really fucking like, we believe in fair speech and, journalism.
Well, RT has worse journalistic standards than Al Jazeera.
Okay, so they're better at doing it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the BBC is an expression of soft power. They're better than Al Jazeera in many ways in doing it. But look, the intention, the Foreign Office and the World Service have been intimately connected. Tom Mills talks about this excellently in his book. I mean, it's brazen about the political function of the World Service, frankly. And I saw somebody was talking about BBC Persian on. They were saying that the Iranian state's nasty to us, and I believe in obviously freedom of expression. You need a free press, etc., etc. But BBC Persian played a very, or the Persian service, whatever it was called in the 50s, again, going back to Mosaddegh, 1951, 1953 was the coup. They played a central role in Operation Ajax when the CIA got rid of Mossadegh and got rid of a democratically elected government. So you can see why these people are very ambivalent towards the BBC. So for me, the RT debate is kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. And it's one of those things that's verboten. If you say, the BBC is about influencing the politics of other countries, they go, no, it's not. We do it out of the goodness of our heart. The BBC is about informing and entertaining and educating the world. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's a lot better than RT, and I love lots of the journalism, don't get me wrong. I'm not drawing an equivalence here, but broadly speaking, they do serve the same purpose. It's about acting on the behalf of the British state.
Well, I mean, I think as a journalist or as a pundit or someone going on the TV, I think the decision or what should go in your head when thinking of do I do RT or do I go on the BBC isn't which country is more objectionable. I think that's a bit of a weird ambit, but sort of which... Because it's not just you do journalism better. I think...
Would you go on RT?
Don't hold me to it. Not
Would you go on... Because do you mind if I say you're part of the LGBT community? You're a gay man?
Yeah.
I mean, that for me is the deal breaker, actually. The treatment of minority communities over there. Because there's lots of countries which aren't very good democracies, right?
Yeah.
Qatar's another one.
But are you then not going to... I think if there was... because it's connected to the Russian state. I mean, you'd go on BBC while homosexuality was still illegal, wouldn't you? Like in the 60s.
You are good, Michael. I think you're very impartial. I respect that.
I mean, I think
really respect
I think
that.
what matters is the standard of journalism. So it's what you're being a part of. So if I didn't go on RT, it wouldn't be because I'm boycotting Russia. It'd be because I feel like the channel's a bit of a joke, and not just in a way that
Owen won't go on RT, right?
Yeah, it's not. The channel's a bit of a joke in the sense that it's not. You don't feel like you're participating in good journalism. You feel like you're participating in propaganda. Whereas I do think the BBC have higher standards,
Absolutely.
which means that by participating in a BBC show, you're not merely participating in propaganda. There's a lot of journalistic merit to what goes out.
So if RT employed like different load of journalists, poured loads more money into, because part of it is the budget's just not as big as the BBC's, and it was a different genre of journalism, you'd be happy to participate.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That's a good line.
Well, it's like Al Jazeera, isn't it? Like I'd definitely
that's
go on
it.
Al Jazeera.
The difference
and
is budgets.
Qatar get up to a load of weird stuff.
Oh, Qatar are involved in it. I mean, they were doing fucking deliveries to ISIS and shit.
Yeah. But it's a good channel that, like, if you're participating in a documentary on Al Jazeera, then you're participating in sort of like quite decent journalism. People are going to watch that show and learn something. In a way that with Russia Today, it's just like, oh, do you really want to?
My misgiving about Russia is, first of all, it's the LGBT stuff, and then secondly, and this is because they used to be like big on Corbyn. Do you remember? They were like anti-austerity movement because obviously they love fucking.
Did they switch? Did they switch?
Yeah.
Sides? So
they love fucking up like regimes, don't they? They were big on Marine Le Pen, and they were like loving Trump, and they were loving Corbyn because these were the kind of insurgents, anti-establishment kind of candidates. And even after 2010, the anti-austerity movement, They were always, getting involved. And then after Trump, they basically switched to Theresa May because the Trump-May axis would have been in far more in Russia's interest than a divided Corbyn and US. And basically, they viewed, after 2014, they viewed the migration refugee crisis as a way of destroying the European Union and of destroying European solidarity. So they basically isolated the most Eurosceptic, xenophobic parties and defended them and advanced their interests, which is worrying because, I don't mind, like, Putin is just as fucking bad as somebody in Russia or
somebody.
Putin's just as bad as somebody in Saudi Arabia, and you can draw equivalences with really nasty people in all manner of countries and regimes. But clearly, like, trying to weaponize the migrant crisis like that to help the far right, I think that's another level, personally. Speaking as a European, even though I'm a proud red Lexiter now.
Yeah.
Speaking as a European, I mean, I believe in Europe being a haven for all manner of people.
Well, you're only a red Lexiter so far as you think it doesn't benefit the far right, right? Which would be very different from Putin's position.
Well, Brexit's happening, so we have no choice.
Yeah.
And I just like it to be vaguely progressive rather than pretend it's not happening. That's my position on Brexit.
As red a Brexit as possible.
We want those fucking property prices to fall as far and as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Red Brexit now.
Actually, that'd be great for property prices, wouldn't it? If you make really strict laws about money laundering, leave the European Union, maybe the housing crisis will be.
Maybe that's the wedge.
Yeah.
That's how you like squeeze the Tories.
Well, that's what I've been thinking in terms of sort of like Labour's line at this point is how do you want to just go hard on that particular line? Because I think there's a real win you can have there, which is to go for. There's a reason that these crooks hang out in London. And there's a reason why people get poisoned in London. And that's because we say, if you've got loads of money, come live here. We don't care where you got it from. We don't care what dodgy connections you've got. Come here and spend your money in our sushi bars, etc., etc., etc.
Sushi bars.
Sushi bars.
All the oligarchs and Go Sushi.
I think
and Wagamama.
No, I think they go above. They have to go higher grade than that, right?
Of course they do, right?
Yeah.
Where do these people eat? I've just posted this link to Gary. Can you get this up, Gary? I just messaged you the Red Brexit article. Zoe Williams, who I love and who disagrees with us on quite a few things.
The New European front page.
No. Yeah, we'll get onto that in a sec. The Brexit article she wrote in The Guardian, and it says, Red Brexiters, wise up. A housing crash won't bring socialism. And then she sort of quotes me saying, Alexa, if we can go back to this, Gary? Alexa, what is Red Brexit? Tweeted Aaron Bastani. Founder of the exhilarating Novara Media, very kind Zoe, thank you. And she compares basically, celebrating the fall of property values to a fire. But the point is, like, no housing assets are actually being destroyed. Value's being destroyed. Value expressed through the price mechanisms being destroyed because these things are commodities. Hey, they probably shouldn't be commodities. They should probably be human rights and everybody should be able to have one. How about that?
I mean, this is straying quite far from the whole Russia poison issue.
We'll go back to Russia
poison. In terms of the house prices falling, I mean, there is an issue because we want a soft landing for the housing market, because if housing prices crash real quick, then you have a load of people in negative equity. If you've just got your mortgage and you just struggle to afford it, etc., then you're super screwed. It's a bit like the housing crash in 2008 in the subprime market all over again, because you had all this equity and suddenly now you're in massive debt. So if we do want to if we want to lower house prices, you need some sort of policy mechanisms, which mean that doesn't bankrupt shed loads of people. And when you bankrupt shed loads of people, that normally has a problematic knock-on effect on the economy. But there's technical fixes for that. I mean, ultimately, we want land prices to collapse.
Well, because you're the guy, Michael. We had a great Novara FM recently. It was Grace Blakely from IPPR, who I love. I think, she's just going to be a superstar in the next 10 years. There was James Butler, there was you, and there's me. And you were like, a recession's good. Because if you have a huge... Well, no, it's not entirely bad, because you were saying this is correct, right? If you have a recession and then you have this huge program of fiscal stimulus, it's obviously going to be... you want kind of recession, you want deflation almost, because then, then if you go to 3-4% inflation, who cares?
Well, you want a collapse in the sections of the economy you don't like, and then you pump up the economy in the areas that you do like.
Yeah.
So at the moment, our economy is goes along by asset prices going up and up and up. What you want to do is you want to pop that bubble, which on its own would collapse the economy. But what you do by managing it is you say, well, like, oh, well, that section of the economy is collapsed. Let's promote one that we like.
Yeah, socially useful investment, right?
Yeah, let's give people a minimum basic income, and then we'll do more yoga lessons or whatever.
UBI, I'm not so sure. The first thing you do, we'll go back to Russia in a second. The first thing you do is you want to retrofit everybody's homes. Energy bills collapse, far more renewable, carbon emissions collapse, and you create a load of community-owned solar and wind. I think that's the first thing you do. I'm talking about tens of billions, right?
Well, I think we have too many rentiers for UBI to make sense because it will get sucked up by the landlords. But if we've collapsed the whole rentier section of the economy, then I've got no problem with
Jacobin have a great article on this actually about the UBI, and they say that UBI is a capitulation to neoliberalism rather than a response to it.
I disagree. I disagree because I think they're going from a sort of dogmatic workerist logic where the only power that is truly left-wing to exert is power in the workplace.
Is that what the argument says? I agree with that. That's a stupid argument.
I'm pretty sure.
Do you not think UBS, Universal Basic Services, makes more sense? I mean, the amount of money that UBI is and what you get for the bang for buck is pretty bad.
I think
is what the article goes into that, right?
Well, I think what you want to do is you want to, where things are best produced by the state, like the health service, you just produce. I mean, the worst thing would be some sort of voucher system that replaces the NHS. I mean, we want the NHS provided by the state. We want land nationalised or parcelised so everyone gets a sort of somewhat equal share. We want, maybe we want some sort of
socialised credit.
Yeah,
to an extent.
These kind of things, but there's also going to be some private ownership and some markets, and we want people to be able to make a choice about where they go to eat.
I'm not saying
what gym they join. Actually, I'd nationalise the gyms.
No, I'm not saying get rid of the price mechanism.
No, but that's where but so long as you have the price mechanism, there's a big use for UBI because you say we'll give you basic income, you can spend it how you like. It just gives people independence from working. So it's saying like the state's going to provide you a bunch of stuff, and for your extras, here's your pocket money. It's like pocket money from the state.
My editor for the book actually agrees with this, I think. I'm kind of unsure. Because it's even if it's only like 40 quid each a week rather, for everybody, it's still a lot of money. And like the bang for... And I know that 2/3 of the population will just pay it back in tax, etc., etc. But anyway, enough about UBI. Russia. We've talked about Corbins' response. We talked briefly about Seamus Milne. There was a break with convention amongst journalists this week when Corbyn's spokesperson, we'll get the tweet up in a second, said something, and then they actually said it was just Seamus Milne.
Yeah.
That was kind of impressive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I didn't. Do you know
tradition-loving Brits?
Do you know the backstory why they named it?
Oh, because they don't like him, right?
Yeah, I suppose they thought it was newsworthy because they thought it was particularly relevant because this is the person who's written op-eds before about how we shouldn't blame Russia for everything. So they're saying that this is because the news story is the supposed warmness of Seamus Milne to the Russian government, then it's part of the news to name the person.
Can I just say, Seamus Milne is the best political communications operator in Britain today. He is like Alistair Campbell, only good and principled. Seamus, keep on doing what you're doing. Ignore the melts. Ignore these sloppy cranks. Just keep on being you. We believe in you. We believe in Seamus, right?
We believe in Seamus. Yes, mate.
He's doing well. He's doing a great job.
He is doing. I mean, you can also. One of the things I quite liked because they named Seamus was you could tell exactly how the quote was said. So he was like, trusting the British establishment. That's gone well in the past.
Who does that?
It was said in a real. I think it was said in quite a deflationary way of just sort of like, you're like, you think we should just accept whatever the MI5 say without questioning it? Like,
don't like people in MI5 now say that. Like former MI5 and MI6 people are like, yeah, we kind of became a bit of a joke under Blair. Like that's kind of like that's widely acknowledged. Like John Scarlett being like just a fucking shill for New Labour. I mean that's widely acknowledged, no? If Seamus Milne says it, it's because he's a Stalinist.
Yeah, well, I mean, you need a motive, right? So there was, obviously, useful doubt is, I think, just what he was expressing, and sort of like a reasonable amount of scepticism is going to be necessary in any situation. Even if Corbyn was in government, we'd want a reasonable amount of scepticism to what that Labour government says about foreign policy realities. But in terms of establishing when and when not to trust the establishment, you need to look at motives, right? In the run up to the Iraq War, there are obviously piles and piles of political pressure to say you need to find WMDs in Iraq. I mean, lots of the sexed up dossier, that wasn't done by spooks. That was done literally by political advisors who were sort of changing words, etc. So I don't know. I don't know what the. I mean, we've touched on it here. What the motive could be. You were saying the motive could be that Russia is a sort of helpful wedge for the Tories. So maybe spooks are sort of more inclined to say it was them. Or was that not what you were implying before?
No, I just think there's a shared interest in, like, probably nobody knows. Look, this is the thing. And you realise...
I mean, I think we agree that Seamus Milne was right to say
of course.
Only an idiot would accept unconditionally whatever the British establishment say without
national
seeing the evidence.
national institutions, media, politics, they make sense of what does not make sense. That's literally their job. And the world is very chaotic, and people have competing intuitions and motivations and observations and interpretations, right? And, you know, the sense-making is the political bit. And, like, you know, I just think... You know this the closer you get, or when you observe power, how shambolic it can be. The Kremlin is probably fucking shambolic. We know full well that Theresa May is fucking shambolic. Like, various oligarchs' lives are shambolic. You know, it's all being made up as they go along. There's not some big conspiracy, some master plan, house of cards. In 5 years, I'll execute this, and this will create this, and then, you know, causal effect will be X, Y, Z. Nobody can do that, sadly. So I just think very likely it's a complete mess. If I was to put money on it, I'd say Putin's probably not responsible, because I think if the Kremlin's going to do something, they would have fucking killed the guy.
I just found the actual Seamus Milne quote. I put it in the notes.
Yeah,
I really love this bit. I think obviously the government has access to information and intelligence on the matter, which others don't. However, also there's a history in relation to WMD and intelligence, which is problematic, to put it mildly. So I think I just love his use of problematic, very sort of like Twitter sphere. So I think the right approach is to seek the evidence, to follow international treaties, particularly in relation to prohibited chemical weapons, because this was a chemical weapons attack carried out on British soil. There are procedures that need to be followed in relation to that. That is a very uncontroversial statement.
And it's really it's triggered the mainstream media, hasn't it?
And Labour backbenchers.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up in 10 minutes. Gary, our camera guy, is very poorly today. Commiserations with Gary. You know. We can't help Gary. We'd love to be able to send Gary off to a restaurant, and, you know, we can't do that. Maybe we could if you went to support.novaramedia.com, made a one-off payment or a subscription, and maybe subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the more our message gets out there, and the more we can help Gary. Because, you know, we're working Gary to death.
Share TyskySour for Gary.
Share it for Gary. Do it for Gary. But we'll wrap up in 10 because Gary's not well. Quickly, I've just shared this with Gary. If we can get this up. The Independent talk about John Scarlett, who was the head of, they call it the SIS, don't they, I think, now, during the Iraq War. And we can pull this up. And it's a pretty funny article. How he's better at making wonga than anything else. Chilcot, of course, found out that the three people primarily to blame, former MI6, the three people primarily to blame for Iraq, the lies of Iraq, were Tony Blair, not even Alistair Campbell, right? Tony Blair, Jack Straw, and John Scarlett. So, yeah, you should probably be quite circumspect about why MI6 say what they do. Okay, so let's wrap up. The Melts. What are they doing? Chris Leslie, all these fucking idiots, what are they doing? These whoppers.
I don't know what they did an early day motion, to say that we stand by exactly what Theresa May says, and we back her judgment of the situation and everything she wants to do. It's like, guys, like, you're the opposition. You don't need to do that. And I think Labour backbenchers think they found a wedge issue, which is they think they're more patriotic than Corbyn. But we've seen this so many times.
They're so stupid.
And they're just not learning. Like, it's weird.
They really every time they think they've cracked it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this time he's... You know, like, it was Mike Gapes. Mike Gapes called for Seamus Milne to be fired for that statement. It's like, if you think that Jeremy Corbyn is going to fire someone for expressing mild distrust of British spooks, you've really misunderstood who your boss is. Like, imagine the people skills to think that Jeremy Corbyn is going to fire Seamus Milne for saying that maybe we shouldn't take
My
everything the
games-
deep state says at face value.
Can you imagine leading the opposition? Oh my god, my gapes, the complete fucking joke that it's Mike Gapes is telling us to get rid of Seamus Milne, who's been absolutely loyal. You can criticise Seamus Milne all day, right? But that team, had it not been so tight and so well oiled, I mean, they wouldn't have gotten through 2016, let alone the last general election. So,
Well, I can't remember which one was it. It was maybe Anatolia, which was saying like, "This aren't my values. This isn't Labour values. It isn't British values." It's like no one cares. Like,
we won the Cold War. I mean, this is why we won the Cold War.
yeah.
Most Brits, even Conservatives, you can't say we won the Cold War and then like
Gavin something.
Gavin Williamson. Oh
No,
my
Gavin
God.
Shuker.
Oh, Gavin Shuker.
He's a Labour MP.
Luton Garrett, yeah.
Oh, is that where he is? I've never heard
He's
of
a
him before.
progress guy.
So
yeah.
he quote tweeted saying like, "Our once great party," to Milne's quote.
Go. Fuck off. Go. Okay, it was once great. Now it's terrible. You don't want to be a part of a terrible party. Go. Find another job. Oh, sorry. You won't be able to get one because your CV is complete fucking... It's a car crash of being a loser. You were never... Is he like Chuka Ruminer? He's never been in the cabinet. He's been in Labour since 2010. They were down and down and down. Losing. It was turned around by Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour left, who Chuka pilloried non-stop. So they will just stay. I did this interview with Laura Parker, and I said, do you think these people can be won round? And she said, yeah, most of them. And I think, okay, so I think some of them can. I think some already have been. I think more will be. But a lot of them, they know they're out. They know they're fucked, but they also can't go anywhere. At least Tristram Hunt, he's kind of telegenic. He was a TV historian. Okay, he can go to the VNA. Where's Chuck Ruminer going to go?
Well, that's what I was saying. The most useful
Where's
thing.
Chris Leslie going to go?
The most useful thing that we could do, like on the Labour left, if we want to transform the Labour Party, do a big crowdfunding campaign, get some big donors in there, and start some sort of NGO in favour of restarting the Cold War and privatising public services.
Hospital car parks.
Yeah, privatising hospital. Well, they're already.
Yeah, but make them really expensive.
I mean, actually, they're not privatised.
Make
So
them outlandishly.
hospitals charge for parking to sort of subsidise their budgets.
Get Chris Leslie to start an NGO, which just makes hospital car parking prohibitively expensive.
But we need to shed loads of money into that so that we can offer all these MPs. They're currently on 71k, aren't they, or 72k? We just need to offer them 75k. Yeah. Well, it can go bust within a year.
They also like going on the TV. It's not just the money. It's like they love going on. Like,
yeah, but that's how we'll frame it.
Chuck Ruminer thinks he's like a celebrity.
We'll frame it. We'll frame it as in like we'll make it seem like this organisation which wants to start a new Cold War and privatise stuff is going to be like a really big... We'll give him a channel.
Oh my God, that's it. Hey,
let's give him RT.
No, Chuck can come on Our Media.
What? Yeah.
Look, you can have like a blog. Just leave them. Why would you do that? What?
There's some really inspirational people that in Streatham that I think would be great at your job, Chucker. So we've thought about it. We've decided as a group you can have a blog.
You can co-host
Novara
Novara
Media.
FM with James Butler.
Every now and again, come on.
Can you imagine? My God. Well, answering these questions, we'll wrap up a couple of minutes. We've got the Gapes of Wrath. Very good. The EDM. I called John Woodcock Jihadi John. Sorry, John. It's kind of funny.
That is funny.
The member for the AKP, he's not obviously a jihadi. That's ridiculous. I would never say that. People are talking about Keynesianism. Oh, this is really... Gapes is some prime gammon. I mean, Gapes is like the platonic form of the gammon.
Yeah, that is true.
Right? He's like the absolute gammon. He's the summum bonum of gammon. Okay, people are just saying Mike Gapes repeatedly here.
People talking about MMT.
Okay, well, we can talk about MMT some other time.
They're difficult to follow because lots of them are comments to previous comments, right?
Yeah. If you want to ask any questions, guys, you've got a minute or two. Far away. MPs pay 77 grand plus a few £100. True. But the state, I mean, they're like the status, right? Look, you go talk to anybody in Luton or in Glasgow or in Cornwall, they'll recognise Jeremy Corbyn, they'll maybe recognise Theresa May, they're going to recognise 3 or 4 politicians. Most people don't recognise the fucking foreign secretary. Boris, of course, okay, fine. But not many people. But people like Chuck Ruminer think that like fucking...
They're celebrities.
They think 80%, they think like David Beckham, 80% of the population knows who they are. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Someone said, did you read Craig Murray's article? He's very sceptical.
Craig Murray's coming on for a lot of hate. Huh?
Yeah. Well, I think he did. Did he do a tweet today saying something about Israel?
I haven't seen
and
this.
people thought it was classic crankery. I'm not sure. I don't want to smear the guy.
No, actually, he's especially during the chicken coup, he was doing some really good stuff. But
let's have a look.
I haven't read the blog today.
So the blog was going down a similar line about Novichok. So he was saying that given the fact that the British state has never come across Novichok, how can they possibly have confirmed that this was Novichok? I think that was one of his big arguments.
I mean, that's too logical for the British mainstream media. Hey, and this is we'll finish with this. The Laura Kuenssberg tweet, and she was saying lots of people are very angry at what Jeremy Corbyn's done today. A leading member of the front bench is going to walk out and resign.
More than one. She said leading members of the front bench.
Complete fake news. And I was like, this is definitely not true. Messaged a few people. No, it's not true. It's not happening. She's the BBC political editor, right? Am I right? That's her job.
That is her job.
It's just completely phony, fake fucking news. Imagine if I said that with 600,000 or whatever, a million Twitter followers. Made up. I mean, God. Haven't they learned? Well, obviously not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
My favourite gossipy tweet this week was Kevin Schofield when whoever's head of governance in the Labour Party resigned. And he did a quote from a source that said, "She held everything together. This is the end of the party." It's like, literally, she's a member of staff. Like, maybe she did her job really well. I got no idea.
She was like business continuity.
But he said, like, this is the end of the party. It's like, mate, you need to get a new source. But if anyone can donate Kevin Schofield some news sources, please, because it's getting embarrassing. If you know anyone famous, you know anyone who works for an MP, just put them in Kevin Schofield's direction so that he can have some slightly more credible sources.
Kuenssberg was saying it was going to be like Caesar getting knifed by everyone. It was the Ides of March, wasn't it? It's today. Ides of March when Caesar was stabbed to death.
Oh, is it?
So I think. People talk about full automation. Well, that's for another time, guys. Good. We could have done this for another hour just because it's like so funny. It is funny watching the Labour melts, the Tories, the media make complete clowns of themselves. And we could laugh about that for much longer. But Gary's sick. We've got to get away. But look, I love doing TyskySour. I think it's my favourite Navarro content. So subscribe. Oh my God. Look at this. Check out Michael. Oh, we haven't even got money for proper chairs.
Yeah. The chair's missing one.
This was actually somebody was farting about on it. And people keep on breaking kit here. Anyway, subscribe.
It's IKEA. It's cheap, but it doesn't last long.
Well, I think also somebody was being a bit disrespectful to the property, but whatever. Subscribe, get the notifications, go to support.navarromedia.com. We want to be doing this every day, twice a day. I love
TyskySour. 4 times a day. Can we get some
fans
ventilation if we're going to do it every day?
Okay.
I feel like I'm getting clammy.
I don't want payment or pension or sick pay. I just want a fan. Good.
All right. Excellent. We'll. Actually, next week I might have someone who actually really knows about.
Oh God, this will be amazing.
Money laundering and Russian corruption.
Who is it?
He's
in the FT a lot.
Yeah, he was quoted in the FT a lot in the stories in the last couple of days.
He's a serious guy.
And he'd gone undercover pretending to be an oligarch. It's called Roman something. And we'll advertise it.
And hopefully we'll also be able to get Yulia, who's an expert on the Ukraine. So we'll have people who actually know what they're talking about. But probably by that point, actually, that's probably the right thing to do, right? Because at the moment it's all just it's a very
we're in speculation land, and we can speculate as good as anyone.
That's our job.
Yeah.
Right. Our job is to
next
speculate
week we're going to have some facts
and laugh at people. That's our job. Right. Over and out. Subscribe, donate, navarromedia.com. And keep Gary in your thoughts, please.
Yeah.
He's not very well.
See you next time.
Bye.